Sunset Boulevard is more than just a film noir masterpiece. It's a haunting love letter to the cruel, unforgiving machinery of Hollywood. Directed by Billy Wilder and starring Gloria Swanson, William Holden, and Erich von Stroheim, this 1950 classic exposed the dark underbelly of fame, ambition, and decline. Today, we'll uncover 25 secrets hidden for decades, truths that make this film even more extraordinary. 1. The original opening was too disturbing. Few films have dared to begin with a corpse floating face down in a swimming pool, but Billy Wilder's original vision was even darker. The movie was initially supposed to open in a morgue, with the camera moving through a room filled with dead bodies. These corpses would narrate their own stories, including Joe Gillis's tragic demise. Early test audiences, however, found this sequence bizarre and unintentionally humorous. They laughed at the morbid tone, ruining the intended atmosphere of shock. Wilder reluctantly scrapped the morgue opening, opting for the now iconic shot of Joe floating lifeless in Norma's pool while narrating his own death. This change transformed the film's opening into one of the most legendary and haunting sequences in cinema history. 2. Montgomery Clift was first cast as Joe Gillis. Before William Holden made the role iconic, the charming yet morally ambiguous screenwriter Joe Gillis was supposed to be played by Montgomery Clift. Clift had agreed to star, but withdrew at the last moment. His reasoning? He was uncomfortable with the storyline, particularly the implication that Joe was financially dependent on an older woman for romantic favors. Clift feared the role would tarnish his image, especially given the film's unflinching portrayal of Joe's desperation. Ironically, his decision opened the door for Holden, who brought a more cynical, world-weary edge to the character. This casting change not only altered the film's tone, but also launched Holden's career as a leading man in Hollywood. 3. Gloria Swanson's real-life parallels to Norma Desmond. Gloria Swanson's portrayal of Norma Desmond feels chillingly authentic because it mirrors her own life in many ways. Swanson was a major silent film star whose fame had dwindled by the time talkies took over Hollywood. While she enjoyed a comfortable life away from the screen, she was still deeply connected to the golden age of silent cinema. Her casting as Norma, a faded silent star desperately clinging to her past, was a bold meta-commentary on Hollywood's treatment of aging actresses. Wilder even incorporated some of Swanson's personal memorabilia into Norma's mansion, blurring the line between fiction and reality. In many ways, Swanson's performance was less acting and more a raw reflection of Hollywood's brutal cycle of fame and obscurity. 4. Cecil B. DeMille played himself. In a remarkable blending of reality and fiction, legendary director Cecil B. DeMille appears as himself in Sunset Boulevard. This wasn't just a cameo, it was a deliberate choice to ground the film's critique of Hollywood in authenticity. DeMille had directed Gloria Swanson in some of her biggest hits during the silent era, and his presence added emotional depth to Norma's character. The scene in which Norma visits DeMille's set, basking in the adoration of the crew, resonates because it mirrors Swanson's real-life legacy. DeMille reportedly improvised much of his dialogue, and his warm interactions with Swanson brought genuine tears to her eyes, making the scene one of the film's most poignant moments. 5. The mansion was a real haunted house. Norma Desmond's sprawling mansion wasn't built for the film. It was a real property located at 641 South Irving Boulevard in Los Angeles. At the time of filming, it was owned by oil tycoon J. Paul Getty's family. The estate had an eerie, abandoned quality that perfectly matched Norma's character, and Wilder saw it as the ideal setting for the movie's unsettling atmosphere. After filming, the mansion's pool, where Joe meets his tragic fate, became a local legend. The house was eventually demolished in the 1960s, but its haunting presence lives on through the film. The mansion's decaying grandeur symbolized the very heart of Wilder's message: Hollywood's relentless ability to build and destroy its icons. 6. Erich von Stroheim was once Gloria Swanson's real director. The casting of Erich von Stroheim as Max von Meyerling, Norma Desmond's loyal butler, ex-husband, and former director, was no accident. In real life, von Stroheim had directed Swanson in the 1929 silent film Queen Kelly, a production plagued by controversy and never officially completed. In a chilling twist, Queen Kelly is the very film Norma screens for Joe in Sunset Boulevard, claiming it as one of her great pictures. This self-referential loop blurs fiction and reality to an unsettling degree. By casting von Stroheim, Wilder not only reconnected Swanson with her cinematic past, but added a layer of tragic authenticity to Max's obsessive devotion. The pain in von Stroheim's eyes during those scenes wasn't just acting. It was memory. 7. Buster Keaton's cameo was anything but funny. Known as the Great Stone Face of silent comedy, Buster Keaton appears in a poker scene with Norma Desmond and a group of old friends, fellow relics of a bygone era. These characters are sarcastically referred to as the Waxworks. Keaton, along with silent stars H.B. Warner and Anna Q. Nielsen, sits in awkward silence as they play cards, their once celebrated faces barely registering life. The scene is eerie and uncomfortable by design. Wilder meant it as a commentary on how the industry discards its pioneers. Keaton, who was struggling financially and emotionally at the time, barely speaks a word in the scene. His stone face wasn't just an act, it was a reflection of how hollow his legacy had become to the studio system he helped build. 8. William Holden's voiceover was a last-minute fix. The film's signature storytelling technique, Joe Gillis narrating the story from beyond the grave, wasn't originally part of the script. In fact, Wilder and co-writer Charles Brackett initially envisioned a different structure. They even filmed sequences of Gillis in the morgue, talking to other dead bodies. When test audiences responded with laughter, the scenes were axed. Scrambling for a solution, Wilder brought William Holden back into the studio to record voiceover narration that would frame the story from Joe's posthumous perspective. The result was unexpectedly effective. Holden's cool, detached delivery heightened the fatalism of the story. Today, that deadpan voiceover is one of the most iconic in film history, and it was never part of the original plan. 9. The title almost wasn't. Sunset Boulevard. It's hard to imagine Sunset Boulevard being called anything else, but the film went through several working titles. Early in development, Wilder and Brackett considered names like A Can of Beans, a placeholder that mocked studio indecisiveness, and A Dark Night in Hollywood. Ultimately, Wilder insisted on naming the film after the real Los Angeles street that had become synonymous with broken dreams. Sunset Boulevard, the actual street, was where silent stars lived, studios thrived, and dreams either came true or died in silence. The title lent the movie an immediate sense of realism and melancholy. It wasn't just a name, it was a funeral procession route for the forgotten ghosts of Hollywood's golden age. 10th. The studio tried to bury the film before its release. Paramount Pictures had no idea what to do with Sunset Boulevard. Executives were terrified that the film's unflattering portrayal of the industry, its decay, cruelty, and delusions would burn bridges and spark backlash. At one point, studio head Frank Freeman even suggested shelving the film or dramatically editing it. But Billy Wilder stood his ground. He insisted on full creative control and had final cut privilege written into his contract. When the film was finally released, it caused a sensation. Critics hailed it as daring and revolutionary. The very industry it condemned wound up awarding it 3 Oscars. The irony wasn't lost on Wilder, who quipped that Hollywood loved to eat its own tail. 11. Gloria Swanson was paid a fraction of the budget. Despite delivering one of the most iconic performances in film history, Gloria Swanson wasn't paid a fortune for playing Norma Desmond. Her salary for Sunset Boulevard was $50,000, a modest sum even by 1950 standards. William Holden, a rising star at the time, was paid more than Swanson. This reflected the cold reality Wilder was satirizing: the industry's declining respect for aging actresses. Yet Swanson never complained. She saw the role as a gift, a chance to reclaim her place in film history. In many ways, it was poetic. Swanson, like Norma, had once ruled Hollywood. But unlike Norma, she handled her fall from the top with grace. Her performance ultimately proved more valuable than any paycheck. 12. The pool was built just for the movie. That iconic swimming pool where Joe Gillis meets his tragic end didn't actually exist when the production began. Wilder insisted on having a pool, symbolic of Hollywood luxury and Joe's final resting place. So Paramount built one specifically for the film, at the Irving Boulevard mansion. The installation cost $15,000, a significant sum for a single set piece. But Wilder believed the shot of Joe's body floating in the water was essential. The overhead shot, taken through the surface of the water with mirrors, was a technical marvel for its time. Ironically, the pool became one of the most famous in movie history, only to be bulldozed along with the mansion years later. 13. The script was inspired by real washed-up stars. While Norma Desmond wasn't based on one specific actress, Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett drew inspiration from numerous real-life silent film legends who had been abandoned by the industry. One such influence was Mae Murray, a once famous star known for her theatrical flair and eccentricities. After the rise of sound films, Murray's career faded, and she was reportedly spotted in public, claiming she was still in demand. Wilder and Brackett also referenced silent actresses like Pola Negri and even Swanson herself when crafting Norma's delusional yet sympathetic persona. Wilder described Norma as a composite ghost, a haunting reminder of how Hollywood forgets its own. 14. Wilder used real silent film props. To enhance authenticity, many of the items in Norma Desmond's mansion weren't fabricated by the art department. They were actual artifacts from Hollywood's silent era. Norma's vanity mirror, her elaborate costumes, even her script from Salome, all were genuine items borrowed from film archives or Swanson's personal collection. Her Salome headdress, in particular, was created by legendary costume designer Adrian for an abandoned project. By embedding real relics into Norma's world, Wilder blurred the line between fiction and history. Every frame of her home dripped with the eerie weight of cinema's past, creating an atmosphere where time had frozen and memory ruled over reality. 15. Wilder secretly filmed the ending without studio approval. The ending of Sunset Boulevard, Norma's delusional descent down the staircase as reporters and police become her imagined audience, is among the most unforgettable finales in film history. But Paramount executives were initially against it. They felt it was too strange, too unsettling, and too grotesque to end a mainstream movie. Wilder, aware of the studio's doubts, shot the scene without their knowledge, using minimal crew to keep it quiet. When he screened it for the brass, the room went silent. No one dared object. Gloria Swanson's performance was so hypnotic, so terrifying, that it stunned even the harshest critics. Wilder had gambled and won. 16. Real police officers were used in the final scene. For the climactic final scene, Norma descending into madness, believing she's on a film set, Wilder aimed for maximum realism. Instead of hiring actors, he cast actual Los Angeles police officers to play the detectives and uniformed men responding to Joe Gillis's murder. This wasn't just a cost-cutting tactic. It was a calculated move to lend the scene a chilling, documentary-like authenticity. The unpolished demeanor and body language of the real cops created a subtle contrast with Norma's theatrical descent down the stairs. Their genuine discomfort, captured on camera, made her delusion even more tragic. In a film obsessed with authenticity, using real cops added one final layer of uncomfortable realism. 17. William Holden hated the role at first. Although William Holden later considered Sunset Boulevard one of the best films of his career, he initially hated the idea of playing Joe Gillis. He felt the character was weak, sleazy, and lacked the heroic qualities he preferred in his roles. It was only after multiple meetings with Wilder that Holden began to see the complexity of Joe, how his choices were shaped by desperation rather than villainy. Holden eventually embraced the role, and it redefined his career. In fact, his performance became the prototype for a new kind of anti-hero in American cinema. But it all started with reluctance and resistance from the actor himself. 18. The famous line was improvised. "All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up." One of the most quoted lines in film history wasn't originally in the script. The line existed in a different form, but Gloria Swanson, drawing from her theatrical experience, added her own twist to the delivery during rehearsal. She slowed the line down, turning it into a chilling crescendo of delusion. Wilder was so captivated by the improvisation that he altered the scene's direction to match her pacing and expression. The final result wasn't just dialogue. It was a haunting performance that turned a simple sentence into an eternal moment of cinematic history. 19. The movie was banned in several countries. Despite its critical acclaim in the U.S., Sunset Boulevard faced bans and censorship abroad. Some European countries, including Sweden and Spain, initially refused to release it, citing its cynical portrayal of the entertainment industry as immoral and unfit for public exhibition. In post-war Europe, where the American film industry was seen as both cultural export and propaganda, Wilder's dark satire hit a nerve. In other countries, religious organizations protested Norma's character and the film's depiction of crime and psychological instability. Over time, the bans were lifted, but for years, Sunset Boulevard remained one of the most controversial American films overseas. 20th. It was almost a stage play. First, long before it hit the screen, Billy Wilder envisioned Sunset Boulevard as a stage drama. The idea of a once great actress decaying in her mansion had strong theatrical roots, drawing inspiration from Tennessee Williams and Anton Chekhov. Wilder reportedly toyed with the idea of mounting it on Broadway with a smaller cast and intimate set design. However, once he began to write with Charles Brackett, the cinematic potential became too strong to ignore. Ironically, decades later, Sunset Boulevard was adapted into a Broadway musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, with Glenn Close playing Norma Desmond. Wilder's original stage dream finally came true, but only after Hollywood had embraced the nightmare first. 21st. Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder split. After this film, Sunset Boulevard marked the end of one of Hollywood's greatest screenwriting partnerships, Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder. The duo had collaborated on over a dozen films, including The Lost Weekend and Ninochka, winning Oscars and revolutionizing storytelling. But Sunset Boulevard pushed their creative tensions to the breaking point. Brackett was more conservative and emotionally reserved. Wilder was cynical, sharp, and increasingly bold. Brackett reportedly found the film too bleak and disliked its bitterness toward Hollywood. After the film's release, the pair went their separate ways, amicably but permanently. Ironically, Sunset Boulevard became their crowning achievement, capturing both their genius and their irreconcilable differences in one devastating final act. 22. The Monkey Funeral was based on real Hollywood gossip. One of the film's strangest sequences involves Norma holding a solemn funeral for her pet chimpanzee, complete with candles and a tiny satin-lined coffin. While audiences saw it as a symbol of Norma's insanity, the idea came from an actual rumor circulating around Hollywood in the 1930s. Stories claimed that an unnamed silent film actress had once staged an elaborate funeral for her pet monkey, treating it like a child. Wilder and Brackett included the scene as both satire and truth, because in Hollywood, the line between them is often blurred. The monkey's death becomes a metaphor for Norma's arrested development, mourning a past that will never come back. 23rd. Hetta Hopper was supposed to play Norma Desmond. Before Gloria Swanson was cast, another infamous Hollywood figure was considered for the role of Norma Desmond, gossip columnist Hetta Hopper. Known for her towering hats and razor-sharp tongue, Hopper had been an actress in the silent era before reinventing herself as a fearsome journalist. Wilder briefly entertained the idea, believing Hopper's notoriety would add a meta-layer to the character. But her lack of acting chops and dominant public persona posed a risk. Hopper instead ended up with a cameo in the film, as herself, reporting outside Norma's mansion after the murder. A curious twist of fate. The woman once considered to play Norma ended up announcing her downfall. 24. The studio almost cut the narration entirely. Even after the morgue scene was scrapped, Paramount wasn't sold on the idea of a dead man narrating the film. Several executives believed it would confuse audiences or make the film too grim. Wilder fought to keep the narration, insisting it was essential to the film's unique tone. He argued that Joe Gillis's perspective from beyond the grave turned the story from a tragedy into a confession. Eventually, the studio relented, but insisted the narration be kept sparse and poetic. Wilder's instincts proved right. The ghostly voiceover became the film's backbone, allowing audiences to sympathize with a man who already knew he was doomed. 25th. It was almost a total box office failure. Despite winning Oscars and critical acclaim, Sunset Boulevard was nearly a financial disappointment. When it premiered in 1950, mainstream audiences didn't flock to see a movie that openly mocked Hollywood. Box office numbers were underwhelming, and some theaters pulled it early. But word of mouth began to grow, especially among cinephiles and industry insiders who admired its boldness. Over time, the film gained traction, especially internationally. By the time of the Academy Awards, it had become a must-see. Eventually, the film recouped its budget, and then some, but it was far from an instant commercial success. Like Norma Desmond, Sunset Boulevard had to wait patiently in the shadows before reclaiming the spotlight. Sunset Boulevard wasn't just a film, it was a prophecy. It showed the world how Hollywood discards its idols, distorts ambition, and destroys illusions. Every frame was soaked in memory and menace. And now, decades later, the secrets behind its creation have only deepened its legacy. If you loved this journey into cinema's haunted past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay curious.